I don't know if I'm live. I'm live. Oh, oh. Oh, well, hello, my baby gorillas. Sorry it's taken so long. I'm sure you're all upset. Let's go straight into this. Where is he? Let's hear the racist that's talking about hate speech.
But why are we so surprised when the senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white? Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white. Whether it's your colour, or whether it's your gender, or whether it's your background, you know, if you get told, actually, you don't belong here, you should kind of look at me and say, fuck you, actually. You do belong. Sorry, it's not first ministry language, but you should.
Fuck you, Hamza, you fucking racist.
Just kind of give two fingers.
But I don't understand why you would come to Scotland and then complain about white people being there. I mean, that's like, it would be better, him and Anis Sarwar would be better being back in Pakistan if that was a problem for them, because there's no white people in charge of anything over in Pakistan, and they're not having these conversations where somebody that's not ethnically Scottish is able to come in and be racist to individuals who are in Scotland.
Excuse me, Hamza, a few years ago you said we have to call out bigots and say F you, didn't you not? Your white speech was the most bigoted thing Scotland has ever heard. So on behalf of Scotland, fuck you. You're a pestilence on the land. You've thrown women and children under the bus. You're despicable. You should be behind bars.
I don't know why anybody would pay money to listen to Hamas useless.
Let's go.
So, in this new hate speech bill that they've passed, on the police, they've said 18 to 30 white men are the most racist. It's certainly not Hamza Yusuf and his child rapist death cult that's the problem. It's straight white men that are the problem. But if you didn't like it here, why don't you leave? The fact that we've got somebody as inept as Hamas useless in the Scottish Parliament is testament to the fact of self-deprecating Scots, because he shouldn't even be in Parliament.
Actually, you should speak to them. And there's robust language if people are genuinely racist, and I've had...
Yeah, like Hamza Yusuf. Oh dear, I think he's projecting.
Too many people that have been racist too late through in my life, and people don't like that, and I'm afraid they'll get...
Yeah. And no self-reflection there. Let's see how popular Hamza's getting. Oh no, let's see if I'm actually... if I'm actually hearing... Am I getting heard here? Let's check and make sure that I am actually live streaming and not... Let's just check and make sure that I'm actually working. Oh, I don't know if that's just me, I can't hear anything. Oh, is this all working? Da 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 da.
The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. almost every trade union in this country
seems to still be a wee bit, even with the green screen, I changed the screen from green to blue, and there still seems to be a wee bit distortion there from the green screen.
Headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public...
And then complain about white people being there. I mean, that's like, it would be better him and Anis Sarwar.
You said we have to call it bigots and F you, didn't you not? Your white speech was the most bigoted thing Scotland has ever heard. So on behalf of Scotland, fuck you.
And not only that, now with the new hate speech bill, he's bringing in legislation. He's actually telling people through the police that certain demographics should be targeted, 18 to 30 white Indigenous males based on race. So let's not kid on that the racism's not come from useless. Let's see how popular he's getting among Scots. Humza Useless has a lower favourability rating among Scots than Sturgeon. Poll finds, and even though under Nicola Sturgeon's new book, How I Killed Your Granny, that allegedly that Humza's even less popular than she is. And this is from the Nationalist Party, fake nationalists. All they are is anti-white racists. That's what they are, including the white people. Reverse racism from people like Wee Nippy and even Alex Salmond. Alex Salmond's no different. That left-wing anti-white racism is rife amongst these individuals. What's this from? Let me give me some credit where credit's due. Independent. Hamas Useless has a lower favourability rating with Scots than his predecessor. Now, nobody's voted for Humza. Humza should have to stand down, or not stand down, but call an election within 6 months of change of leadership. That includes Westminster as well. You shouldn't be allowed to just stand as an unelected leader, and not to mention the fact that not only has nobody voted for him, but there's also he's not won an election. So he's not won one election so far. So he's a failure. He's a failed politician. The only people that have voted for him are obviously a bunch of communists, racist communists who hate their own country. And that's the only people that's voted for him. He's not won an election, even where the SNP have held the seat. He's still not won an election, and it looks like going from the highest amount of MPs that I think any one party's ever won, they're going to have the largest drop. No, we're not going to see a drop like this from the SNP since the Labour Party was in charge in Scotland. But all we're doing is going from one Islamo-fascist-led left-wing government to another Islamo-led left-wing government. So there's no choice, there's no differentiation in policy, and it's the policies that are wrong. Don't forget that Anis Sarwar, another Islamo-fascist and anti-white racist, gave the white speech, as well as Hamas Useless, another Islamo-fascist. So both of them gave anti-white speeches supported by two left-wing parties, Labour and the SNP, call themselves progressive. And now Hamas Useless and Anis will try and do the same, has brought in Sharia law, but people don't realise it's Sharia law because they've never read the Quran, they don't know what Sharia is. And so they've gradually brought in the increase in pricing for drinks, the decriminalisation of sex with rape, because obviously Muhammad was a rapist and had sex slaves. So there's a lot of things that he's doing, including this anti-Indigenous hate speech bill, which is basically backdoor blasphemy laws. So people don't actually understand it because they've never read it. But all we would do is swap in one left-wing Islamo-fascist-led party for another, so there's not going to be an underlying change in policy. And don't forget, Anis Sarwar also voted for the hate speech bill, as well as the illiberal Liberals, which I've told you before, and one of the fake Tories, one of the progressive neo-communist Tories. So Scottish Labour, Anis Sarwar has, and don't forget the SNP and Labour are just two cheeks of the same asshole. So over to Anis Sarwar has highest favourability rating of leaders of the three parties. Well, that just means there's a lot of stupid people in Scotland, according to the Ipsos Scotland. It's found the SNP overall favourability rating has gone from -1 in March 2023 to -10 in March this year. There'll be no change in policy. They would have locked us in their house. They brought forward the hate speech bills. There are a bunch of thickos just like in the SNP. They're both absolute dullards. So the fact that going from one to another is not going to change anything. We're still going to have the same policies, and the reason is left-wing politics. And that's the problem. The left-wing politics isn't solving issues in Scotland. It's keeping the issues in Scotland and maintaining the left-wing racist, sexist, and anti-men, anti-straight, and anti-white people. It's really anti-Indigenous at the expense of the Indigenous population, and that's what but it's really the scumbags behind in the Labour Party and the scumbags in the progressive side of the SNP. These are the people, and the Greens obviously, these are the scum that are actually keeping the Islamo-fascist in power. They wouldn't have came to power if it wasn't in the back of the scum in the Labour Party and the SNP. And this scum was the same scum that was in Persia and in Iran, who helped bring forward the Islamists, and then the fascist Islamists took charge, and then they subjected decent people in Iran to brutality, theocratic brutality from a camel piss drinking child rapist in the desert, a rapist and a child sexual predator that the state is based around in an Islamic country. So that, and then what they did was the Islamists then started to kill the left because they're stupid, because the left are stupid, and they voted for their own destruction, or they helped implement their own destruction in Iran because they're stupid. So that's what they're doing. They're stupid here as well, and they're doing the same stupid things, saying the same stupid things, and it's really because they're retards. So I hope I've articulated that very well so we all understand what's going on. So I'm not quite sure what's happening with the chat, and I'm not quite sure where everybody is, but let's check again and see if there's anybody here. Not quite sure if anybody is actually watching. It's quite incredible that they do actually thwart the channel. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable what they do. So let me just put it up on Twitter, see if we get an audience.
New Eden.
So
a universe brimming with possibility and rife with adventure.
Let's put it up in Humza Useless things. So we've got people who are actually going forward for their own destruction just now, and we are seeing the destruction of our own society through other things that are actually happening.
A titan of industry.
That are being indoctrinated, their children are being indoctrinated with anti-racist theory, and it's scumbaggery of the left. It really is scumbaggery of the left, what's actually happening here. Let me just stop that in case there's any points. So let's listen to Douglas Ross and see what he's saying from the Daily Rubbish.
My colleague, Murdo Fraser, was the subject of a spurious complaint about a social media post which was critical of the SNP government. He discovered that Police Scotland had recorded the complaint against him as a non-crime hate incident. No crime.
This is like the Stasi, so obviously the left are almost bringing in like this Stasi type of neo-communist type ideology. I would sack them. I would sack anybody that was exhibiting extreme left-wing, like critical race theory. They'll all get sacked.
Was committed, but he is now on the police record as a perceived offender in a supposed hate incident despite never being charged, tried, convicted, or even informed the police had a file on him. Hamza Yusuf, how can it be right that innocent people are put on the police record?
Don't forget, in Islam, which Hamza Yusuf has sworn on the Quran, and as well as Anas, have killed 340 million people and had sex slaves. ISIS is not an extremist Islamic group, it's a literalist Islamic group. They literally want to impose Islam, which advocates for raping children and having sex slaves. So you have to be really stupid to want to bring that in and have these people. I wouldn't even have them in my party. I wouldn't have anybody that's Muslim in a political party, because this is what they want to do. This is the underlying, and this is what they've done in every place to actually persecute the indigenous population, and they shouldn't be in any positions of authority
when they have done nothing wrong.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, let me try to provide some context on the issue that Douglas Ross raises. I think it is important that when we're talking about hatred, hate crime.
How can you be talking about hatred when under the left they've killed 100 million people and under Islam they've killed 340 million people, and then you've got the cheek to talk about hatred? It says in the Quran to murder people, gay people, people of left Islam, people who are non-Islamic, people who don't have a religion. It says to murder them and to have them as sex slaves. So what are you talking about hatred for? You absolute clown.
Crime, or indeed the Hate Crime Public Order Act, that we do so in a way that is not just considered.
And as if he's the arbiter of hate. I mean, as if he's the person that should be sanctimonious enough. He's a prick. He should be sanctimonious enough to actually be the arbiter of who's hateful and who's not.
But also ensures...
But also this is Nazi-esque, because this is saying that we have protected groups. I'm sure that's what the Nazis did about the white Aryan race. So this is exactly communist, socialist group mentality and bigoted. And not only that, he's also wanting to target straight white men, young men between 18 and 30, who are indigenous to Scotland. And he's already bringing in lecture, supported by the scum and the SNP, the fake nationalists, just a bunch of communist scum.
That we stick to the facts. Let me try to provide some context on the issue that Douglas Ross references. Firstly, let us remember that the recording of non-crime hate incidents has come as a direct result of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. It was contained within...
But what happened to the Chris Donald's inquiry? The Labour Party and the left don't even want to put up a monument to Chris Donald, who was murdered by Pakistani guys. And I think the actual torture was underplayed in all the actual media.
Recommendations, 12 to 17, of the Macpherson report. So they have been around, the recording of non-crime hate incidents, for many...
Well, they shouldn't have done that.
Many years. Secondly, as well as being around for many years, non-crime...
But English law and Scottish law are different, unless it was a parliamentary thing from Westminster. It is surely that Scotland implements its own law. And if it's implementing the same law, why you want to leave the UK? This is the thing that the SNP are not actually talking about. The Westminster and in fact, I would have said the SNP were slightly more authoritarian, but the SNP and Westminster were almost in lockstep during COVID. So the SNP didn't follow the Swedish model. It didn't have any other differences. So why are we just wanting power to move from Scotland to England if we're going to do exactly the same, or Westminster to Holyrood if we're just going to do exactly the same policies? Is that because there's nobody in there that actually has any original thoughts?
Hate incidents are recorded for non-crime incidents. Are recorded for other incidents as well that don't meet a criminal threshold, such as...
Well, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It should only be for criminal things that meet a criminal threshold.
Example, for domestic abuse incidents. And I don't know if Douglas Ross is suggesting or not that he doesn't think that...
Well, maybe domestic abuse.
Domestic abuse incidents shouldn't be recorded if they don't meet a criminal threshold, or whether it's just in relation
to hate crime or not. Thirdly,
yeah, because hate crime is subjective. Physical abuse is not subjective.
Let me be clear that of course, the Hate Crime Act is not yet in force. There's
Thank God, because we'll be phoning in to complain about you, Hamza.
nothing within the Hate Crime Act that changes how...
And that reminds me, so everybody's coming out at 1:30. The protest starts at 1:30 at the Parliament. Not sure if there's a walk at 1 o'clock down the Royal Mile to meet at 1:30 at the bottom of it. So start at the top of the Royal Mile against the hate crime march. Everybody's marching there. And then Comedy Unleashed. Now I've not even got a ticket. Comedy Unleashed is sold out. And obviously I should have been there, and I don't even know where it's going. So before, we had prohibition about alcohol in the United States, and you had to go to speakeasies, undercover speakeasies, and then you get prohibition against, what else did we get prohibition against? We get prohibition against can't remember, there was something else we get prohibition against, can't remember. But now we're having speakeasies against comedy under this fascist. Hearty feelings, hearty feelings.
How hate crime, or indeed a non-crime hate incident is recorded. Let me, if I can, make that point by quoting Professor James Chalmers, who's well known to this chamber. He says, and I quote, "Such recording, in terms of non-crime hate incidents, is a long-standing feature of police practice."
Well, I would suggest it should be deleted. The Police Scotland under both Labour and the SNP and the left wing in Scotland is starting to resemble some piss-pure communist dictatorship. We'll just start calling them the Stasi.
Communicating clearly just how little the Act changes is essential to avoid undue fears about its impact and any attempts to abuse it. Lastly, Presiding Officer, because I know this is a substantial issue, that notwithstanding this, Police Scotland have made it clear last year, and again they've made it clear because of recent press inquiries, that they will be reviewing how non-crime hate incidents are recorded, cognizant of the changes that have been made in England and Wales. So I go back to the central point.
Criminalising speech, hate speech is subjective. It's been going. The commie scum has been trying to push this for years. I don't know why commie scum would be pushing hate speech, considering they've killed 100 million people. But they've been pushing it for a number of years. And now we've got Islamo commie scumbaggery with an Islamo fascist like Hamza Yusuf pushing this with all the dough balls back there in the fake Scottish Nationalist Party.
Point that I started with, Presiding Officer, that there is far too much hatred. We all accept that in our society. We all should come together in order to help tackle it. And I would urge the Conservatives in particular, notwithstanding legitimate questions that Douglas Ross asks, to come together in that effort to support the Act and support a zero-tolerance approach to hatred in our society.
No, I don't. That's coming from an Islamo-fascist. Who's wanting to target straight white men between 18 to 30 and then talking about, so he's actually going there using the police to target a specific group, and then so he's the perpetrator playing the victim. So let's not kid on that he's not the perpetrator.
Douglas Ross.
But we all have a zero-tolerance approach. We all have a zero-tolerance approach to hatred in society, but my question, which the first...
But how can you have a zero-tolerance if you're not intolerant about communism and Islam because of the amount of murders that these ideologies have done? Yeah, you would have to... Any one of the actual MPs would have to stand there and say, well, we need to now talk about the 100 million people have died under communism, and now the racist communism under what they call progressivism, but this racist Nazi-esque communism that's coming out of the so-called progressives.
Minister, took over 2 minutes to try and answer.
Honestly, this thing's not...
Should innocent people have a police record when they have done nothing wrong? And it sounds from that answer from Hamza Yusuf.
So what they're wanting to do is actually have specific classes that are actually privileged, and this is why it's backdoor blasphemy laws, because he wants people who follow a child rapist death cult to have a privilege and not be criticised for following a child rapist death cult, where they're camel piss drinking, inbreeding child rapist of a prophet shouldn't be criticised. and or it's hate speech, but that's in the books. So unless you've read the books and know Islamic history since the 7th century that's murdered tens of millions of people, he's over there talking to Erdogan, who killed all the Christians, the Armenian Christians in Byzantine and Constantinople, and he killed all the Greeks, the Greek Christians, and now through Azerbaijan, his proxy state is now attacking Christian Armenians in Armenia. In Azerbaijan, which isn't really Azerbaijan, that's a fake state.
He believes they should. And he's previously said this is about monitoring, about gathering data. But what will the value of that data be if we can now see that individuals can put forward multiple complaints with little or no substance in them, and that data will then be stored and recorded in the way it has with Murdo Fraser? And this unacceptable.
And I don't know, obviously, both Anis allegedly and Hamish Useless are coming from drug dealing families. So these allegations would be quite worrying, because obviously the amount of drug deaths, and both these families are linked to these potential drug deaths in these families.
Incident is just the tip of the iceberg. The SNP's Hate Crime Act will come into force in just a few days' time and could lead to more cases just like this. The controversial new law is ripe for abuse.
And everybody should phone and complain about Hamza.
In a letter to this Parliament's Criminal Justice Committee, the Association of Scottish Police Superintendents said that some individuals will, and I quote, will seek to weaponise the new legislation and associated police investigation. Does Hamza Youssef agree with some of the most senior police officers in Scotland? And does he accept that this law could be weaponised?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Douglas Ross says that we all have a zero-tolerance approach to hate crime. I'm not entirely convinced.
Douglas Ross shouldn't be saying that. The hate crime, there's no difference between hate crime and any other crime. So the actual underlying crime is the issue. And Islam promotes hate. So we've got to close down the mosques.
That when you take money from a racist misogynist and then refuse to give it back, that is a zero-tolerance approach.
Oh, racist misogynist. The word, as I said, racist comes from Trotsky, who murdered millions of people. So this racism thing. But how many, let's talk racism, Hamza. How many white Europeans are in the Pakistani parliament? And are they talking about racism over there? Are they talking about we require to know diversity as our strength? And is it racist for all the rapes by Muslims all over the UK targeting non-Muslims? What does that fall into? Is that hatred? What about the murders by Muslims, the mass murders in Manchester, nearly in Glasgow, in London, by Muslims? Is that hatred, Useless?
We are enablers. We make enabling software.
In relation to the issue of non-crime hate incidents and the impact and the effect they have, and what is the purpose of them, I refer Douglas Ross to the Chief Constable.
The purpose is actually having a privileged group. That's what it is. So a crime is a crime. So let me ask you a question. If you were going to get murdered, would you prefer to be murdered for jealousy or racism or theft? Or what the underlying motivation doesn't matter. And I think you've got a cheek being a Muslim talking about hatred when Islam's killed 340 million people worldwide and is killing people every day. I don't see any mention of the teacher getting murdered or the other teacher in the UK that's in hiding. Is that the hatred you're talking about?
It was very clear at the Scottish Police Authority board meeting last week the value of the recording of hate incidents. And she said, and I quote directly, on reporting hate incidents, they can and do give us a sense initially of community tensions. So they are useful to us in terms of engaging with communities, engaging with different...
No, because this only goes way. What you've done in this scumbaggery bill is actually said these people are individuals who are requiring defence, these certain groups, and what you basically done is bring in backdoor blasphemy laws, but you haven't said all of the community, and then you've targeted 18 to 30 white straight males as a group through the police. So you are targeting people. So you're actually excluding people out with the bill and saying these people don't count from within the bill. So you're only saying only certain people count, and it just shows you what a bunch of scumbags in the SNP as well backing that. I mean, really filthy scum.
Groups and communities, and being able to understand where there is potential for tensions to be raised at the end of quote. So I would say that there is an understanding of the reason and rationale why hate incidents are recorded. That is precisely why the Macpherson report recommended them in the first place.
What was the report about Chris Donald? What was that report? Was that the only racist murder, as far as we're aware, was by Pakistanis in Scotland, who are now about to be let out, and they actually tortured them. So this is a torture murder, which is more relevant than a racist-based murder.
Around about 25 years ago, Presiding Officer. And let me say, in terms of the Hate Crime Act itself, of course we take seriously what is said by the Scottish Police Federation, ASPS, or any other representative organisation representing police officers. But I think it is incumbent on me to say that this Act, of course, the new offences in relation to stirring up, are hugely important. Those stirring up offences for racial hatred have existed since 1986. We are simply extending those protections.
Well, again, the word racist came from Marx, so basically the Conservative Party are bringing in actual communist ideals. So there should not be any racist legislation, because that means that the other person is a different race. When that's racist in itself. It's the human race. So this is all, and it's anti-liberal. So these are all filthy Marxists, kidding on their liberals. They're not liberals, they're filthy Marxists, with an Islamo-fascist in charge, bringing in neo-communist legislation.
To other marginalised group, I think it is important for Douglas Ross to be honest, to tell people in this chamber, and also the people of Scotland, who is it that he thinks is not deserving of those protections in the same way that...
Well, I'll tell you who you think is not deserving. 18 to 30-year-old white straight males. That's who you think's not deserving of it, because they're not included in the bill. Useless. Oh, your pals down the Kiddie Fiddling Mosque are all included. All inbred mutants are all included. But again, nobody's included that's indigenous to here. So you're setting up, through legislation, a superiority bill. That's what you're doing.
That I have been protected because of my race since 1986.
Douglas Ross.
The problem is, First Minister, people will not be protected if the police cannot do their job. We have warnings week after week from officers on the front line, from the Police Federation, and now from the Association of Scottish Police Superintendents. Their line at the top of their letterhead says, representing the operational leaders of the police service in Scotland, they are giving as stark a warning as possible to this SNP government that the bill is flawed. It is not going to do what MSPs who supported it wanted it to do. And those warnings are being ignored by Humza Yousaf. But let's see if he will also ignore others on this. Katharina Casper is the chair of the Scottish Police Authority's Complaints and Conduct Committee. She said an investigation itself can become a punishment which may have a chilling effect on the freedom of expression. And Humza Yousaf has directed his comments today at me as Conservative leader and the Conservative Party. What does he say to one of his most senior SNP MPs, Joanna Cherry KC? She said this, and I quote, "For many, the process will be the punishment. Being under police investigation will be stressful, costly, damaging to reputations, and could lead to problems in the workplace. Presiding Officer, the police should not be dispatched to people's doors to check their thinking." Doesn't the First Minister recognise the chilling effect his law will have on free speech?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, these issues were rehearsed last week, but to emphasise and reiterate to Douglas Ross that there are, of course, protections of freedom of expression, freedom of speech explicitly within the bill. In fact, there is a triple lock protection because there is
a triple lock
in the bill itself in relation to freedom of expression, and they were a matter of compromise between the government and members of the opposition. I think they were a good example of how we do legislation here in this Parliament. Of course, there is a reasonable person defence within the legislation itself, and of course, our legislation has to comply with the European Convention of Human Rights and the important articles within that in relation to freedom of expression. Secondly, Presiding Officer, I have absolute faith in police's ability to weed out vexatious complaints. They unfortunately have to deal with vexatious complaints across a whole range of legal matters and complaints that are made right across the legal landscape. I have absolute faith in their ability to address those issues in ways that are appropriate. And let me go back to the same...
Well, a vexatious complaint is not going to be one against you. That would be a true complaint because you are openly against the people that live here.
The point here that stirring up offences are not new. They have existed since 1986 for most of my entire life, and therefore I've got absolute confidence in Police Scotland's ability to be able to police new stirring up offences in the ways that are appropriate. And let me say again to Douglas Ross that his party, the Conservatives, did support stirring up offences when they were when those offences were extended in England and Wales in Westminster. So if they're okay in order to protect people in England and Wales...
So if we're just bringing in the same legislation as England and Wales, what's the difference about why we're paying you clowns to just do exactly the same as what's happening down south? Have you not got a differentiating IQ between you? Have you not got an ability to come up with something yourself?
Why are they not okay to protect people here in Scotland? And I say to Douglas Ross, if he believes in a zero tolerance approach, if he believes that somebody...
I don't believe in the zero tolerance approach. I don't believe that at all. We don't have a zero tolerance approach. We have a preferential approach just now.
Jewish or elderly or gay or disabled.
No. I don't think they should be treated any different than MDLs. That's illiberal. If you're saying that certain groups should get preferential treatment, that's illiberal.
Should be protected from behaviour that's threatening or abusive and intended to...
Why should they get any different justice than MDLs? Why based on characteristics? That's what the Nazis did. Based on my characteristics, I deserve more protection than MDLs. That's illiberal.
Hatred. Then why is he opposing this legislation? Because
it's illiberal and you're a fascist.
It certainly looks like just for the sake of opposition, Presiding Officer.
Fucking idiots.
Our bouquets are made locally, by hand, because they tell stories.
So says the member of a child rapist death cult that had sex slaves.
Before we move to Mr Ross's next question, of course, there are many members who would like the opportunity to put questions to the First Minister today, and therefore I'd be grateful if we could have more concise questions and responses. Douglas Ross.
Hamza Yousaf can see absolutely no flaw in his legislation that he took through this Parliament, despite the overwhelming evidence we are getting from frontline officers and many others. The Hate Crime Act will come into force on April Fool's Day.
So this is not just, and just to clarify this is not just been brought in Scotland. This is the globalists trying to commandeer speech. They're doing the same in Ireland. Trying to do the same in America. Fortuitously enough, they've got the First Amendment. But the globalists, which all of these parties are shills for, are trying to bring in the same legislation that's set down by Baldy Dr. Evil in Davos, who is trying to controls all the parties, and that's why none of them have got an original thought. That's why Hamza Useless can say to Ross that he's doing exactly, Douglas Ross doing exactly the same thing down in Westminster, because they're all, the manifesto is a globalist manifesto. It's not the lies that they tell us.
But it is,
and this is just to bring in increased prevention of speech and limitations on the individual's life.
Joke. The Scottish Conservatives opposed it at the time and still do. It is so flawed that...
Well, one of the Conservatives didn't, and it just shows you that probably be with some communist conservative. There's obviously communist conservatives now. I don't know what they're progressing. Is it Marx? Protecting or conserving, is it Marx?
Pensions, it is likely to create more division. Overworked, under-resourced police officers will be forced to deal with hundreds of malicious complaints. Hamza Yusuf's law could be weaponised against people with opposing views. Police investigations will tarnish the names of innocent people and could silence them. This law is overreach by the SNP. So how long will it take before the Hate Crime Act goes the same way as named persons, offensive behaviour at football, gender recognition reform and every other flawed SNP law?
And this is all from the far left. This is all the left wing, far left, and through the universities, legislation that's come in, and every one of it's dropped by the wayside because these people thought they were, this is a great idea, and it's all dropped because it was stupid. The people that were saying it are stupid, and they've wasted time talking about, can a man have a penis, or a woman can have a penis, and things like that. We've just wasted time on this absolute nonsense for years and years. And we're now got more nonsense from an idiot. And he is the April Fool. We have the April Fool as a leader.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Hate Crime Act is one that not just I am proud of, but this entire Parliament should be proud of. And of course, every single political party came together to support that act, except the Scottish Conservatives. And why should they be proud of it? They should be proud of it because it was supported by a number of groups. It
just shows you how left-wing our society, even the illiberal, liberal, undemocratic Democrats, it's a completely illiberal point of view, yet these absolute twats supported it as well. These twats, the SNP twats, the specky, goofy Mr Magoo and Big Bird and Fanta Pants and the so-called progressive twats, just filthy Marxist scum. The differentiation between that and Nazism is very slight. Very slight. As what do you call him? Who was the guy in America who went over, the Nazi went over to the New York Post? Who was it? It was the Minister of Propaganda. He said the difference between Hitler and Lenin is very slight in the New York Times or the Washington Post. I think it was New York Times. And he's basically an Islamo-racist, anti-white, anti-Scottish example that the SNP have brought in, the fake nationalists have brought in, because they're just basically a bunch of communists, and they keep saying they're progressive, but just filthy Marxist scum.
Represent some of the most marginalised in our communities. The Scottish Council of Jewish Communities stated, and again I'll quote,
so what, are the Jews a privileged group? Are the Jews, should the Jews not be treated exactly the same as anybody else? I'm sure that a lot of Jews would probably like to be just treated normally rather than having this. I don't know what anti-Semitism, you'd have to give me a definition of anti-Semitism. Because as far as I'm concerned, Islam's anti-Semitic, from what I read of it.
That they support the bill, strongly support the introduction of this new offence, that's a stirring up offence.
So he's pulled all the Jews in Scotland, has he?
And its application across all protected characteristics. Why is it important? Well, it's important because Lord Bracadale, who led the...
All protected characteristics? This is Nazi-esque authoritarianism.
The independent review, which then of course helped us to develop the Hate Crime Act, said that stirring up of hatred may lead to violence or public disorder. It may incite people to commit offences such as assault. He called it conduct that is morally wrong. And I think he is absolutely... Conduct that's morally wrong. So we're setting up people who are moral arbitrators, are we? Is that not what they do in is that not what they do in Iran? You have the moral police. That's anti-Scottish. These things are not from Scotland. These are fascistic ideals. Absolutely right to do that. So we have freedom of expression clauses within the bill that protect people's right to freedom of expression. But what we do with this Hate Crime Act is we ensure that Scotland does send a message, this Parliament sends a message.
We're going to send a message to you, you wee fascist, and tell you where you can stick your bill. You and the fake nationalists can stick the bill where the sun don't shine.
This country sends a message to those who are often the targets of hatred.
Like 18 to 30 white straight men.
We truly have a zero tolerance approach.
We should have a zero tolerance to a child rapist death cult.
Presiding officer, that's something I'm very proud of indeed.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
There's Anus saying, "Oh, that's great. I love your hate speech bills. That's great." Both of whom families apparently are killing people through their drug dealing in Scotland, allegedly. So that's good scumbaggery of the highest order. Let's see if I can't believe I'm not going to get to Comedy Unleashed. So I've been complaining about this for a number of years, and unfortunately Alba's not got a leg to stand on, considering I don't know how these twats have managed to get in. Alex flounced out of the SNP conference saying, "Oh, we're not left-wing enough," and now we've got absolute doughballs infringing on speech and acting like a bunch of fascists now.
If you're looking for a quick and easy way to get your business online, there's no better place to start than with our managed WordPress plan.
There have been a number of occasions.
Comes into effect on April Fool's Day, criminalises threatening.
Where's my ticket for Comedy Unleashed? It's apparently sold out. I'm very disappointed.
Or abusive or insulting.
So it'll be like a speakeasy. You'll have to show your face to get into comedy club. That's how Orwellian these scumbags have become in the SNP. Oh, is he based? Is he a based guy? Just now we've got the devastating effect of actually prohibition in comedy, and it just shows you what a bunch of absolute scum we've got as a political class.
Insulting behaviour which is intended to stir up hatred against people based on age, disability, religion, sexual orientation and transgender identity. The act has proved controversial. The head of complaints at the police watchdog says it could have a chilling effect on freedom of speech. But
yeah, the Stasi.
The bill's defenders say it is nowhere near as draconian as is being suggested, and protecting people.
Yes, it is. It's not required.
From hate is long overdue. So joining me to discuss this, the Alba MP for Kirkcaldy, Neil Hanvey. Welcome to the show, Neil. Now, Humza Yousaf has come out and said there's been a lot of disinformation about this. People are overreacting. This bill is absolutely fine. Is he right?
No, well, I made a bit of a light-hearted comment on...
So, Alba are sound on the postmodernist Marxist agenda, the wokey commies agenda, and they're quite sound in that. But the thought that that Alba isn't a globalist shill party is for the birds. I mean, Alex is wanting to join the undemocratic EU and get governed by these twats.
Comment on his claim that there's disinformation being spread about this legislation by saying he'd misspelled information because what's really happening is that people are spreading the truth about this legislation, and it's, you know, nobody is saying that hate crime should be given a green light.
There should be no hate crime. It doesn't matter what the underlying crime is, if it's what the underlying motivation for the crime. The crime is the crime, not the actual underlying motivation. People shouldn't get preferential treatment.
But the way that this bill has been, or this act has been constructed, is deliberately intended to prevent freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of belief. There are certain elements that are excluded from the bill, particularly around gender critical beliefs, and most importantly, sex as a class. So women's sex-based rights are not covered by this bill. Sex.
But that's because you're trying to go after the wrong thing. You should try and criminalise the crime, not the motivation for the crime. So the motivation for the crime doesn't matter. It's an irrelevance. It's the crime itself that's irrelevance.
The bill is silent on the definition of sex, and therefore same-sex attraction is effectively meaningless. And it really has a chilling effect on political discourse. And I'm very concerned about it. You know, the official line is, there's nothing to see here, but actually there's a huge amount of concern about this legislation for all of the reasons that I've just covered.
Well, we've invited the SNP onto the show. They haven't got back to us yet, so fingers crossed for next week. But I would like to ask them, and so I'll just ask you instead. Can you give me an example of a crime or an incident that would be covered by this legislation that isn't already covered by existing criminal law?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Andrew, given his due, is absolutely a terrific commentator, and he's correct as well. Spiked is a great programme as well. If you're not signed up to it, go and sign up to Spiked as well. But yeah, correct as well, Andrew.
Well, I mean, all of the standard hate crime offences that we would ordinarily expect, inciting racial hatred, inciting hatred against any religious minority, all of that already exists. What the Scottish Government has done is they've reinterpreted the protected characteristics within the Equality Act, and so instead of it being a gender reassignment, they called it gender identity, which is not a protected characteristic in law.
Yeah, and how's chopping off somebody's penis or breast not conversion therapy? So you can't convert people. See, what the globalists are wanting to do is reduce population, but chopping off a guy's dick and making him a eunuch, or chopping off women's breasts and giving them hormones is going to destroy their reproductive rights, which is what they want to do. But it's also backdoor what the Muslims want to do, because obviously the Muslims hate gay people and same sex. So if you change them into a different gender, forget them being sterilised by the procedures, then they're not going to be gay or homosexual. So basically that we are bringing over what they did in Iran, because Hamza hates gay people and he's taken away the right for them to wear the gay flag thing round their neck, like the pendant type things round in the Scottish Parliament. So, and he wasn't there for the gay vote on, was it marriage or whatever it was. So he doesn't like gay people, so that's why the conversion therapy of chopping off healthy body parts is, and it's also reducing population as well.
And certainly in my experience over the last 5...
But they also want to do population replacement through the open borders. This is done deliberately. So they want to kill the indigenous population and use open borders to actually replace it as well. So they're doing a double whammy.
5 years, there have been a number of occasions where, you know, I've been spuriously accused of transphobia because I've spoken out in support of women's rights, or I've spoken up for LGBT rights, and because I haven't spoken about transsexuals, which is a completely separate protected characteristic, again, I've been accused of all kinds of terrible things. And what this legislation does is it emboldens those queer theory radicals, those people who are intent on promoting queer theory, and that includes the Scottish Government, to stamp down on those of us.
So we've got a declining population. Promoting homosexuality is not going to increase our birth rate. Promoting feminism is not going to increase our birth rate. So all these ideals from the left are a total waste of time. And they're there to prevent reproduction.
Who are in touch with material reality and feel that our sex-based rights contained in the Equality Act are directly under threat because of this legislation.
Now, the police have come out and said, you know, we're not going to target performers, we're not going to target comedians, because there was some linked materials from a police training session where they were clearly preparing for the situation where they might have to arrest a comic for...
But if you vote for Labour, none of this is going to change, because they believe in exactly the same thing. The problem is left-wing politics in Scotland, and until people start to waking up and actually understand this is all from the extreme left, these are all neo-Marxists, postmodernist Marxists that are doing this stuff, and also tied in with the Davos agenda as well. This has all been done, and it's been done to you, not for you.
Offensive speech. So they're saying they're not targeting, but are they not saying that they will investigate absolutely every complaint that is made?
Well, allegedly so, but they, you know...
Let's see if I've got anybody here. Somebody here. Whoa. Oh, my phone. Oh, I'm died. Right. I think my phone's died, does it? Oh, let me see if I can do this. Oh no. Hold on. Oh.
The kind of complaints that I would be interested in the police investigating are the types of assaults that have been happening on women in Scotland that have been dismissed as irrelevant. And that was, you know, I'm thinking of one particular situation in Aberdeen where a woman was assaulted in broad daylight in full view of many bystanders, and the police just effectively ignored that. But her key words are being pursued vigorously by the police, and it's that incongruence in the way that the law is being interpreted that really is giving everyone such a cause for concern.
And didn't they just put out a recent statement saying that they were going to reduce the number of crimes that they investigate? They're not going to bother with certain forms of vandalism or theft if they think they can't be solved. So in other words, they'll leave actual crime and they'll go after spend all this time on offensive words.
Yes, so I mean that's absolutely correct. So the police are in Scotland. The police are under enormous pressure. I know that firsthand. I've met with local senior commanders and inspectors, and I know that they are under massive pressure. But they are now being instructed that they have to investigate these types of non-crime hate incidents. I know that that's been something that's been remedied down south because there was a rash of police activity around those types of non-crime events. But there's no such protection or prevention of those kinds of events being investigated and the individual being placed on some form of register or list, which could impact on their employment, their future employment, their general livelihood. And the most important thing is, even if there is no crime, and even if nothing comes of the charges that are brought, the process of being investigated, of having to go through a criminal trial, of having to defend yourself. There's a saying in Scotland that we've all become very, very used to, even before this came into effect, is that the process is the punishment. and that intrusion into your life, the loss of your IT equipment, confiscation, having your name plastered all over the newspapers, dragged through the media, been there myself. That's all part of the punishment that these vindictive queer theory extremists want to inflict on people. And, the wrong target is being protected by this law. There is nothing to prevent this type of extremism being stamped down upon by this legislation, and there is nowhere for women to seek protection for their sex-based rights, or indeed same-sex attracted people to be protected for their sex-based rights in this legislation. And that admission tells you everything that you need to know about the real motivation behind this legislation.
Neil Humvey, thanks very much for joining me.
So that's correct as well. So that's basically where we're at just now. Absolutely disgraceful. Let's see if this is actually working. And yeah, well, I don't know why there's no comments. That's quite interesting. Certainly a few thumbs up. At least some people are watching it. Guys, I've changed this to green screen as well. Thought that was quite interesting. But anyway, 1:30, the rally, April the 1st, to condemn the April Fool Hamas useless. I think it's starting at 1 o'clock up the top of the Royal Mile, walking down the Royal Mile, 1:30 rally at the Parliament. And obviously, unfortunately, Comedy Unleashed is sold out, and you speak easy for people who are funny and not all these absolute brigands. The people are actually funny, and rather than the fascists that have taken over our country, these communists who don't want any free speech. That's been sold out. I want a ticket. Better get in contact with me. The Duke of Cumbernauld. The United States Justice. Better get in contact with me and get me a ticket. I missed the last one because I bought a ticket to his last one and I couldn't come because of circumstances. But the Duke of Cumbernauld better get me a ticket. I don't even know where it is. That's the other thing. I don't actually know where it is, because you've got to, because of all these non-fascists that are stopping comedy and stopping plays that might hurt their feelings. That these people are basically stopping everything that's entertaining, and what a nasty wee bunch these cretins are in the Scottish Parliament. Let's get rid of them all. Let's get rid of 80% of them. Let's get rid of them. Just get them and get a new job, something that's more appropriate to their lack of intellect and lack of political nuance. But baby gorillas, I'm out of here. If I can get out of here, might not be able to get out.
Hi, I'm Quentin.
That's enough of you. Oh! How would you stop this? Don't know what's going on here. Let's do it this way.